I'm Savannah Richardson, and I am a GRC content analyst at Tandem. I am so excited to be here with you today to dive into the top 10 AI risks facing financial institutions. I've put in a ton of work and research into this topic, and it's awesome to be able to bring it all together for you today. I know AI is such a hot topic right now, and I'm really thrilled we get to look at it through the lens of our own industry to see how these risks show up in what we do every day. So just a brief disclaimer, this presentation is for information only. This presentation contains my own opinions, and this presentation is proprietary. And a few housekeeping items. This session has audio and video feed. If all you can see is the presentation, well then you still get the same great information, just not my face. And at the end of the session, give us your feedback and you just might win a $25 Amazon gift card. The slides, recording, and certificate of attendance will be sent to you via email after the session. And finally, please interact with us today. Use the questions panel that you'll see there. There are over 600 people registered, so we will get to as many questions as we possibly can. Okay, and just so you know a little bit about us, I work with Tandem, an information security and compliance application by Connectrix. Tandem is a suite of applications all focused around helping businesses create and manage their information security programs. One area we especially like to focus on is helping financial institutions be exam ready. Whether that's with risk assessments, policies, vendor management, or anything else, we're here to help you. All right, let's jump into our agenda today. It might look like a short list on the slide, but trust me, there's a lot packed into each of these points. So first, we'll start with a quick refresher on what AI is and where we stand with it today. Then we'll dive into the top 10 AI risks that is on everyone's radar. And finally, we'll wrap up with some resources and a chance to answer some of your questions. And just so you know, I will be taking a look at some of your questions today, so feel free to submit your questions as we go through this presentation. I'll have some stopping points to answer some of those. So now let's get into AI. Okay, so depending on who you ask, AI can mean a lot of different things. Some people think of chatbots or voice assistants. Others imagine predictive analytics or self-driving cars, which sounds exciting, but I have yet to try the Waymo self-driving cars because let's be honest, if I can't control the moving vehicle, then I'm uncomfortable, and you can confirm that with my husband. But in banking, it's often about systems that can analyze data, detect fraud, and assist with customer service. So let's start with a simple definition. AI refers to computer systems that can perform complex tasks that normally require human intelligence, like reasoning, decision-making, or creating new content, and that's straight from NASA. So under this big AI umbrella, you've got machine learning, deep learning, and generative AI. Each one is basically a subset of the other, getting more specialized as you go along. Now, it's kind of a simplified definition, but it gets the context across. And right now, we're mostly hanging out in the generative AI space, where tools can create text, images, and more. So now let's talk about what the regulators are up to. And spoiler alert, there's still no single unified federal AI law in the US just yet. My coworker Elizabeth Weathers wrote a blog about this that goes into more detail. So if you're interested in that, you can do a deep dive into that blog. But that doesn't mean regulators are sitting on the sidelines. In fact, just recently, like yesterday recently, the US Treasury announced a new public-private initiative to strengthen cybersecurity and risk management for AI. So throughout February, they're releasing 6 resources focused specifically on AI risk and resilience. And that tells us something very important. Regulators may not have a standalone AI rulebook yet, but they are absolutely paying attention. Agencies like the OCC, FDIC, FinCEN, and the Treasury are consistently reinforcing the same message. If you're using AI, especially through a vendor, you are still responsible for making sure it's secure, fair, and compliant. AI doesn't remove accountability. So in the meantime, we lean on what we already know works, like model risk management, third-party oversight, cybersecurity frameworks, and data governance and privacy standards. Even without a formal AI regulation, existing frameworks already give us the structure to manage AI responsibly. And wouldn't you know it, we here at Tandem, we're on top of these things. We really like to dive into whenever there's a new guidance or regulations set out. And so we already have a posted date for our next webinar for the AI, cybersecurity, and risk management, what the Treasury's new guidance means for your financial institution. So we are going to take a look at the guidance and the resources that are coming out by the Treasury Department, and we're going to give you a webinar. So that will be on Thursday, April 30th at 2 p.m. All right, now we're getting to the exciting part, the reason why we're all here, the top 10 AI risks facing the banking world. So I created a list of what I think are the most important risks we need to keep on our radar. Now, I'm the kind of person who likes to break things down into categories. So instead of just going one by one and feeling a bit scattered with these risks, I've grouped these risks so we can see the bigger picture and the foundational controls for each category. So we've got three main categories that we're taking a look at today, and that includes vendor management, which includes threats like vendor compromise, insecure coding practices, and a lack of explainability, transparency, and privacy. Then we have human element, where we'll talk about things like deepfake, shadow AI, and over-reliance on AI. And finally, we have data management, which covers AI hallucinations, data quality issues, data leakage, and ethical bias. So let's dive into each category and see what these risks really mean for us. So first up, let's talk about the vendor management side of things. When we use AI for vendors, we inherit their risks. That means managing those vendor relationships is a cornerstone of AI risk management. And one of the biggest worries here is what happens when a vendor gets compromised. So here is a definition for vendor compromise. I won't read all of these, but I want to summarize some of the information. So a vendor compromise is when a third-party AI provider is breached or just doesn't deliver what they promised. So even if your own systems are locked down tight, you can still get caught in the fallout if your vendor has a bad day. And why does that matter so much? Well, if your institution has an incident, it's mostly just you dealing with it. But if a vendor gets hit, it can ripple out to dozens or even hundreds of institutions at once. That makes vendors a pretty tempting target for attackers because one successful breach can open the door to so many organizations. And as we all know, it's not just an AI specific problem, but it's especially important when we're talking about AI service providers. So now that we talked about why vendor incidents matter, let's dive into a real world story of what can happen when an AI service provider is breached. So in August 2025, and I can't believe it's already 2026, it's crazy, but back in 2025, hackers managed to breach a popular AI chatbot platform called Salesloft Drift. Now, this platform is used by tons of businesses to engage website visitors, qualify leads, and book meetings through AI-powered chatbots. It's integrated with tools like Salesforce, Slack, Google Workspace, you name it. Essentially, it's the middleman for a lot of automated sales processes. So what did the attackers do? They stole authentication tokens, basically digital keys that let them access all these connected systems as if they were legitimate users. That meant sensitive data for multiple companies was suddenly at risk, all because one vendor was compromised. It's a textbook example of a supply chain attack. The vendor became the gateway to all of those other integrated services, and even trusted third-party vendors can be a target. If their AI systems are compromised, it's not just their problem, it's yours too. So this is a reminder that even if you trust your vendors, you need to keep a close eye on how they manage security, because a breach on their side can have a ripple effect on your organization. And I just wanted to mention here, we have a lot of trusted vendors that we've used and that we've used for a long time. But now that they're adding those specific AI services to their own service, we may need to do an additional review on just the AI services that they're providing, just to make sure that they are still looking and managing that security on their end. Okay, next up, let's talk about another key risk area, insecure coding practices when you're dealing with your vendors. So here's the deal. Insecure coding basically means developers aren't following a solid, secure development lifecycle. Maybe they're skipping steps like thorough testing, or they're not doing regular code reviews. And when that happens, it opens up vulnerabilities, and these vulnerabilities can expose your AI system and its data to all sorts of exploits. Now, even if you're not the one building the AI, maybe you're relying on a third-party vendor, you're still on the hook to make sure they're doing things the right way. That means ensuring they're following secure coding practices and they're checking their code regularly and protecting against threats that target AI. And here's where it gets really interesting. A lot of vendors use open source code to build or to train their AI models. Now that's pretty common and not necessarily a bad thing, but it does add another layer of risk. If the data they're using has been tampered with before it even reaches your vendor, you're dealing with what we call data poisoning. So data poisoning happens when attackers sneak misleading or harmful data into those open source data sets that are used to train AI models. Basically, if your vendor is pulling from these community-driven or public data sets and someone's messed with them, the AI can end up with all sorts of unpredictable and biased and just weird behavior. And the tricky part is you might not even realize it's happening. So why does that matter to you? Why does it matter for us? Well, if your vendor's AI is trained on data that's been tampered with, you could end up with biased outputs, untrustworthy predictions, or even hidden backdoors to how that AI behaves. It's kind of like someone adding another ingredient into your recipe without you knowing and then wondering why the food tastes off. So what can you do? You can't personally check every line of code or every piece of data your vendor uses, but you can ask them for documentation. Ask how they validate their models, what data sources they trust, and what security controls they have in place for their training platforms or pipelines. It's all about making sure you know what they're keeping, how they're keeping things clean and secure on their end. Now, let's dive into another risk here when we're working with vendors, and it's the lack of explainability, transparency, and privacy in AI systems. AI systems may give results without clear reasoning, provide little insight into how data is used or stored, and lack strong privacy controls. So here's what that means. Sometimes AI can feel like a black box. It gives you results, but it doesn't really tell you why it's made a certain decision or how it used the data you gave it. And it's not clear how data is stored or processed, and you might not know if your privacy standards are being met. So even if you didn't build the AI system yourself, you're still responsible for its outputs, how it handles data, and whether it complies with laws and regulations. If your vendor can't explain how decisions are made or show how data is processed and protected, you're basically flying blind. That's risk you can't measure or manage properly. So let's break those 3 elements down one by one and see why they matter for us. So first up, we have explainability. Explainability means clearly understanding how an AI system makes decisions. Think of explainability as your AI's ability to show its work. It's like asking, hey chat, why did you make that decision? And actually getting a clear answer. Financial institutions need this because if your AI system denies someone a loan or flags a transaction as fraud, you need to be able to explain that decision to regulators and customers. So bottom line here, if your vendor can't provide that level of clarity, you're left in the dark and that's a risk. Next, we have transparency. So transparency means having visibility into how an AI model was built, how it functions, and how it handles data. If you are using an AI service, but the vendor won't tell you what data it was trained on, how it makes decisions, or when it last got updated, that's not transparency, that's a black box. Bottom line, you can't assess the risks if you're dealing with a black box if it creates a blind spot for your institution. And finally, we have data privacy. Oh, let me get there. There you go. So data privacy means ensuring data is handled securely and in line with privacy laws. For our financial institutions especially, we're held to strict standards when it comes to protecting customer and company data. Just because you're using a third-party AI tool doesn't mean the responsibility goes away. If you're sharing sensitive data with a vendor, it's still your job to make sure it's protected. That means making sure the vendor has strong privacy controls in place and that are aligned with the same rules, guidance, standards you have to follow, like JLBA, GDPR, or other applicable laws. Bottom line, if the vendor handles your data, you share the risk. All right. Now, there are a few ways to effectively manage these areas, and one of those ways is ongoing monitoring. And how do we do that? Well, a really good control for vendor management in the AI space is having a solid AI policy that includes language about how to manage vendors. So what might that look like inside your policy? Well, first, you can include a section on understanding how the vendor assesses, processes, and secures that input data. Basically, figure out what kind of data the AI system is using, like customer PII or internal data, and see how that data moves through the vendor's systems. It's crucial because if sensitive data is involved, you're still on the hook for keeping it safe, even if it's processed off-site. Next, in your policy, you can cover evaluating how the AI model is trained, validated, and maintained. As we know, AI isn't static, it's always learning and evolving. You want to know how the vendor originally trained the model, how they validate accuracy and fairness, how often they update it, and how changes are documented. That way, you can keep track of any unexpected behavior or what we call model drift. And finally, you'll want to monitor performance, things like uptime, update cycles, and how security incidents are handled. Treat AI tools like any other technology service. Check if they have SLAs for uptime, how often they update, and how they handle incidents. If the AI suddenly acts weird or goes offline, you want to have a plan in place. In other words, build these expectations into your AI policy and your contracts. That way, you're not just doing standard vendor due diligence, you're specifically accounting for AI risks. Another really effective way to handle and control the risk from your AI vendors is actually through your contracts and agreements. Due diligence is huge, but you also want to weave that protective language right into those agreements to cover AI-specific topics. In other words, you'll want to address things like transparency, making sure you can get algorithm updates, decision logs, or explainability reports. You'll want to talk about bias and fairness, like using bias detection tools or running fairness audits. Include model lifecycle details, how the models are trained, versioned, updated, or even retired. And of course, you want to clarify liability. Who's responsible if the AI makes a harmful or costly decision? All of these additions basically take your existing vendor management practices and give them an AI lens. So all of this should feel familiar in your vendor management program. These are things that you do, but again, we're just adding that AI lens to it. It's all about asking the right questions, setting clear expectations, and building those right into your contracts. And with so many vendors now adding AI into their products and services, it can feel like a challenge to know how to manage those risks effectively. So we did create an AI review template for your vendors. This is a free resource, but if you are subscribed to the vendor management product, then you will already have access to that template inside the settings of vendor management. I have someone dropping the link there so you can access that checklist. And if you have any questions about it, I'm happy to answer those. All right, so we're taking a small break just to go and see if we have any questions. And let me find my mouse so that I can click the questions box there. Someday that will happen. I found it. Okay, open up the questions. All right, okay, so some of these questions were technical stuff, so it looks like we got those answered. And yeah, don't forget to submit your questions. I will stop and answer them along the way, but we'll go ahead and continue on with the presentation. Great, hopefully I'm already answering all your questions. This is really like a big confidence boost for me. All right, so now it's not just about vendors. Humans play a big role in all of this too, whether it's getting tricked by deep fakes or relying too heavily on AI, our own behavior can create risk. So let's start with one of the most alarming trends we're seeing, deep fakes. So in a nutshell, a deepfake is any audio, video, or image content that's been manipulated using AI to appear real, even when it's entirely fake. These fakes can mimic real people's voices, faces, movements, and even mannerisms with stunning accuracy. And I mean, yeah, they're super impressive, but they're also very dangerous. Let's take a closer look at how these deepfakes are already being used today. So I scraped the internet. I looked at some recent news about deepfakes, and these are some real events that I found. So first, a doctor's voice deepfake to give out false medical advice. CEOs cloned to approve wire transfers. A company in Hong Kong lost the equivalent of 25 million US dollars because scammers used deepfake audio and video to impersonate an entire executive team on a Zoom call. Let's just take that in for a second. Can you imagine getting a call from the president of your company or your CEO saying, hey, we need you on this important call right now? As a good employee, heck yeah, I'm available for my CEO or for our executive officers. So I jump in on that call. I see a group of our executive team there and they all seem real. I'm hearing their voices, I'm seeing their mannerisms, and they want me to do something very important to them. I can feel for that individual that fell for this because that's a lot of pressure. So, okay, moving on. I feel like I had to point that out because I was in my head, I was like, this is crazy. I feel so bad for that person. Okay. So it's not just corporate targets either. We have social media, dating apps, and even voicemail greetings are being scraped and cloned. Military officers and first responders are having their identities stolen to create fake profiles and commit fraud. Okay. And the scariest part here is that it doesn't take much to pull any of this off anymore. All a criminal needs is a picture and a few seconds of your voice, maybe from a podcast, a news interview, a webinar, or a casual social media post. From there, AI can clone your voice to sound urgent, emotional, and completely believable. So why does this work? Because deepfakes don't succeed by attacking systems, they succeed by hacking us. They're designed to trigger how we naturally make decisions, especially when we're busy or under pressure. When a deepfake works, it usually hits 4 cues at once. It feels real, it feels familiar, it feels urgent, and it feels overwhelming. When all 4 of these are present, our brain shifts from analyzing to reacting, often before logic has a chance to even catch up. And for financial institutions, this hits close to home. We rely heavily on verbal communication calls, voicemails, video meetings. If a voice sounds right and says the right things, it's easy to trust it. And that's exactly what these attackers are counting on. Okay, I wanted to take a deeper look at some of these scenarios, our common scenarios that we're seeing now. And one of the scenarios that we're seeing a lot of is impersonation of executives. So in this scenario, instead of a suspicious email, a deepfake voicemail or even a live call comes in using the CEO's voice. It sounds urgent, maybe a last-minute wire transfer or access to sensitive information. And because it sounds like the CEO, someone might bypass standard procedures, thinking they're just being helpful. Now, this has been a huge trend, big enough that the FBI has even reported on it in their IC3 report that I have linked in the slides, which you'll have access to after this presentation. But they do give a lot of scenarios based on impersonating executives. Our next scenario is bypassing identity verification. So imagine someone cloning a customer's voice and calling it to reset a password or initiate a wire transfer. If your system relies on voice authentication or simple phone-based verification, that's a real vulnerability. Deepfake selfies and doctored photo IDs can be used to open fraudulent accounts, reset passwords, or access online banking portals. I have another link there from the Toronto Police Service that talks about an individual that created over 600 synthetic identities. They opened hundreds of accounts and used these accounts for in-store and online purchasing. Now, all of these accounts allowed for the accredited accounts allowed them to be drawn beyond their limit. And so because of this, there was confirmed losses of about $4 million just from one individual. And next we have the hijacking the hiring process. So we're seeing more candidates using AI tools to cheat. For example, someone might use ChatGPT or Claude to answer technical interview questions off screen, especially in remote or developer roles. But that's just the beginning. In more serious cases, people are using deepfakes or voice synthesis to pretend to be someone else entirely. We've seen an uptick of candidates apply with fake names, fake resumes, and even show up to video interviews using AI-generated faces and voices. And I said that and it made it sound like we're receiving applicants here at Tandem. We haven't seen that, but I've seen an uptick in news for this happening. And this isn't just hypothetical. The FBI actually issued a warning about North Korean IT workers impersonating US citizens to land remote technology jobs, sometimes using AI-enabled techniques to cover their tracks. Big companies are noticing this. Google, Cisco, McKinsey, many are bringing back in-person interviews or requiring live video calls, even for remote roles, just to verify identity. Now you might think, well, that's just an HR problem, right? Not really. For banks, this is a security issue. If someone gets hired through deception, they could gain access to internal systems, customer data, or even sensitive financial operations. It's also a reputation risk. No one wants to be the financial institution that hired a deepfake. So here's the takeaway. Even if your hiring is mostly virtual, you may want to require at least one live identity check, especially for roles that touch sensitive data. The one thing about deepfakes is that you can't eliminate the risk, but you can take action and mitigate any potential damage. And here are a few things to consider when we're talking about controlling the risk for deepfakes. First, we want to have some identity verification. Always use multi-factor authentication when possible, especially for anything sensitive like wire transfers or admin access. And here's a big one, employee awareness and training. Teach employees what to do, what to look for, like weird blinking, off lighting, or voices that just sound off. You want to run simulations so they can practice spotting audio and video fakes. And you also want to make it easy for them to report if they've seen anything suspicious. You also want to protect your customers. Add reminders in your apps or online banking to watch out for impersonation scams. Policies and governance. Include deepfake risks in your incident response plans and your business continuity plans. You can create tabletop exercises in regards to deepfakes. And then you also want to secure the hiring process. Do at least one live or in-person interview. Use AI tools carefully to spot red flags like laggy video or weird voice sync. And you also, as a good practice, just follow up if something feels off in that conversation. All right, and if you want to learn more about the psychological aspect of why deepfakes affect us and our employees and talk about deepfake training, we do have this helpful blog there that we will have linked in our conversation. You'll see that link there in the chat, but if you are interested, you want to do a deep dive, you can take a look at that blog. And then within our Tandem incident management software, we do provide some deepfake scenarios that you can access and use for tabletop exercises. And then if you subscribe to policies or our phishing product, we also provide a deepfake training course that you can have for your security awareness training with your employees. All right, so shadow AI is when employees use AI tools like ChatGPT, Claude, Perplexity, or browser extensions without the company's approval or oversight. It's kind of like shadow IT, but with AI. So let's take a look at an example of how that plays out. So shadow AI tends to sneak in through free AI software tools, browser extensions, and internal automations. These are tools employees might download or start using without going through IT. Maybe it's a free Chrome extension that summarizes emails or an AI tool they found online to automate internal reports. So at first glance, it might seem harmless, even helpful, but when these tools fly under the radar, you lose visibility and control. Sensitive data might get pasted into chatbots, extensions might have access to confidential screens, automations might generate reports with inaccurate or manipulated data. Shadow AI introduces risk because it's invisible. And when you don't know where AI is operating, you can't evaluate how secure or reliable it is. So let me share a quick story that really illustrates why this matters. So not long ago, I heard about a company where the ISO decided to send out an email to all of the employees at the organization. He asked them to list any AI tools or plugins they were using at work so he could figure out what was approved, what wasn't, or which tools might actually be useful for handling sensitive data in the future. And when he started reviewing the responses, he noticed that a few employees had installed Grammarly as a browser plugin and an application on their laptops. It seemed harmless, just a helpful tool for writing emails and documents, right? But here's the catch. Grammarly had access to things like their Teams, emails, Word, even their browsers. And when the ISO dug into Grammarly's data policy, he found that it was retaining user data for up to a year and using it to train its AI model. That meant potentially sensitive company information was being collected and stored without the employees knowing. And just to show you that this isn't an exaggeration, here's a screenshot from Grammarly's own privacy policy. And to read some of this out to you, it says, for troubleshooting and product improvement, we typically retain user content for no longer than 1 year. And with the Grammarly editor, we store documents you create until you delete them or we close your account. Now, thankfully, the ISO acted quickly. He reached out to the employees using Grammarly and asked them to remove that plugin and the application, and then also added it to the company's do not allow list. Now, this was Grammarly's privacy policy when the situation happened, and I decided to do some digging and look at its current privacy policy. They did make some changes and some edits to the privacy policy, which I'm not entirely sure it was for its improvement. But instead of having a time frame now of how long they retain data, it's pretty much however long they deem necessary to retain that data. Now, they did add something in their settings where the user can go and opt out of training or having the AI model train off their data. So if you do have employees or you yourself is using Grammarly, I would highly recommend going into the settings and making sure you're opting out of the AI model being trained off your data. And something else that I thought was really interesting that stood out to me, and I believe they have a partnership with another AI vendor that has created this AI model for them. The AI model is now called Superhuman, which is just, again, very interesting to me. So even something as simple as a writing assistant can be holding on to sensitive data far longer than you would expect, and maybe even using it to improve their AI models. Now let's talk about setting some ground rules and controlling this risk. And one of those ways is your acceptable use policy. It's one of the clearest ways to show employees how AI should and shouldn't be used at work. So in your acceptable use policy, you'll want to lay out what's okay and what's not, what tools are approved, when they can be used, like drafting content, maybe not making a final decision, and what should never be shared. Think of things like customer information, financial data, or internal reports. Next, you want to set some boundaries. Even the best AI makes mistakes, so your policy should clearly say, don't use AI to make big decisions like approving loans or hiring. And finally, you want to train your team. A policy doesn't help if no one knows what it says. So offer real-world training with AI risk examples, help people know when to pause and ask questions, and remind them AI is a tool, not a replacement for their judgment. The goal here isn't to scare anyone. It's really just to build confidence. When employees know that the rules and feel supported, they're more likely to use AI tools in a smart and secure way. Okay, another resource I want to give you guys, if you are thinking about drafting an AI policy or if you need help writing your policy, we do have some resources. We have a webinar called How to Write an AI Policy and a blog that's related to that webinar there. And if you want an AI policy, we do have an AI policy template in our Tandem policy software. So if you subscribe to policies, then you'll have access to the AI policy template. All right, on to our next one. On to our next human element section. It's over-reliance on AI. So here's the thing. When employees lean too heavily on AI tools to do their core tasks or make important decisions, things can get a little tricky. Over time, the AI can become the expert in the room, and people might lose their ability to question or verify what it's doing. We see this play out in two big ways. First, in decision making, if people just accept the AI's recommendations without a second thought, they might miss errors or end up with poor outcomes. And second, there's a skills gap. If we let the AI handle everything, employees might lose some of their critical thinking skills or just forget how to do things manually. So let's start by talking about decision making and how to keep a healthy balance. AI can definitely speed things up, but when we stop questioning what it spits out, we run into trouble. It's really important to keep humans in the loop to avoid bias, legal issues, and losing customer trust. And now you're going to hear me say human in the loop for the rest of the presentation. But first up, our over-reliance on AI and decision-making specifically, we'll see this in loan denials. If a bank uses or a financial institution uses AI to decide who gets a loan and no human ever double checks, you can imagine the problems. The AI might unintentionally discriminate based on something like zip code. And without a human underwriter reviewing it, the customer doesn't get a fair shot to appeal or understand why. Next, let's talk about false positives and fraud detection. Sometimes AI flags perfectly legitimate customer activity as suspicious and might freeze an account automatically. Without a human looking into it, the customer is just left frustrated, maybe even financially harmed. And if it keeps happening, people lose confidence in the financial institution. And finally, let's touch on business decisions like using AI to screen resumes or recommend promotions. The risk is that the AI might mirror old patterns and reinforce existing biases. It can unintentionally favor candidates who fit past trends, and that can lead to unfair outcomes or even compliance issues. The bottom line, always keep a human in the loop to make sure AI decisions are fair and transparent. All right, now let's talk about what happens when we rely too much on AI, especially when it starts replacing the need to actually understand our own systems and responsibilities. First, we run into a loss of organizational knowledge. When employees constantly turn to AI for answers, they stop learning the policies and the responsibilities themselves. Over time, this creates knowledge gaps across your team and makes it harder to onboard new hires because there's no one left who actually knows how things work without a tool telling them. Next up is missed errors. If someone uses AI to generate a compliance letter or risk assessment and it includes inaccurate or outdated information, and no one double checks it, that error gets sent out. And in a regulated environment, that can lead to some big consequences. There's also compliance risk. Regulatory expectations often require people to understand and explain their decisions. But if the answer came from AI and no one can walk through the why, then your audit trail breaks down. And finally, we see skill atrophy. People start losing touch with their own technical judgment or writing skills. Developers, for example, might get used to having, say, Claude write their code, but if that code isn't being reviewed by someone with enough skill to catch issues, you're left with unreliable or even insecure systems. So while AI is a helpful tool, we have to be careful not to let it take over the thinking part of our job. So how can we balance AI with use without becoming overly dependent on it? Well, like I say, you're going to hear me say this a lot. You want to make sure there's a, say it with me, human in the loop. That means employees are required to validate AI outputs, especially when the stakes are high, like in decision making or anything compliance related. AI should suggest, not decide. You need clear policies that outline when and how AI can be used. Is it okay to use AI for brainstorming? Yeah, sure. But for financial or for final decisions or client communications, maybe not without oversight. You want to spell that out in your policies. And let's not forget about training and upskilling. As AI tools evolve, your team needs to stay sharp, both in their subject matter and understanding how to use AI responsibly. And finally, you can build scenario-based testing into your processes. Ask, can your team still do the job without AI? Can they spot when the AI gets it wrong? This helps build resilience and keeps critical thinking front and center. All right, we're going to take a small break here, and I'm going to look to see if we have any questions that I can answer right now. Let's see. It looks like most of these have been answered and some technical issues, so some of the ones that I've already seen. Okay, great. Let's go ahead and move on with the presentation. And we're on to our last category for today. So we're looking at data management. So the quality, structure, and source of your data directly impacts how your AI behaves. And when things go wrong with data, it shows up fast in the form of hallucinations, misinformation, or even data breaches. So in this section, in this category, we're going to walk through some of the most common data-related AI threats, starting with a fun one, AI hallucinations. When your tool just makes things up with total confidence, I feel like I have an issue with that myself. I do answer questions confidently, but this isn't about me. We're talking about AI. So let's take a closer look. AI hallucinations occur when an AI system confidently generates false or misleading information. These responses may sound accurate or be presented as facts, but they're actually incorrect, made up, or based on faulty data. Now, here's the challenge. Most people don't catch these hallucinations, especially when they're in a hurry or assume the AI knows more than they do. That's where the real risk kicks in. Imagine someone using AI to write an audit response, a risk report, or even legal documentation, and it includes hallucinated facts. If no one double checks, that misinformation could go out the door and put the institution at risk, and that's a problem. One of the most well-known examples involves OpenAI and a lawyer who used ChatGPT to write a legal brief. The AI made up entire court cases that don't exist. They had realistic names, citations, and everything, but it was totally fake. It's totally wild. So if you're interested in that, I have the report linked there in the slides that you'll have access to after the presentation. So why do AI hallucinations even happen? Well, let me tell you why. In September 2025, OpenAI, alongside researchers from Georgia Tech, published a groundbreaking study confirming that AI hallucinations are inevitable, even in the most advanced language models. Why? Because AI doesn't actually know anything. It's just really good at guessing what comes next in a sentence. Think of it like a student taking a test they didn't study for. Instead of leaving the question blank, they take a wild but confident guess. That's what AI does when it's unsure. Some key things the study found was that first, hallucinations aren't a glitch, they're built in. Second, no model is immune. Newer models hallucinated even more when summarizing public information. That's information that we have access to, up to 48% of the time. And third, statistical constraints make hallucinations unavoidable. There are some deep mathematical reasons why this happens, and I'm going to simplify that for us right now, but sometimes a model just hasn't seen enough examples. Some tasks are simply too complex for the model to fully grasp. And even with perfect data, the computations can still be too heavy to get right every time. And get this. AI systems are rewarded for sounding confident even when they're wrong. So unless a model is specifically trained to say, I don't know, it'll usually just try its best to fill in the blanks. And that's where risk creeps in. So what should we take away from all of this? First, and this one's important, AI hallucinations risk is permanent, not a bug. It's not something that we can just patch or update away. Hallucinations are built into how these models work. So instead of trying to prevent them entirely, we need to focus on containing the damage when they happen. And that means putting some strong practices in, like keeping a human in the loop, that human oversight, especially for anything high stakes. Setting up domain-specific guardrails so AI knows where the boundaries are. So this is really restricting restricting access to certain data, or restricting the AI into that data access. And then we also want to continuously monitor outputs to catch errors before they cause problems. And when you're choosing an AI vendor, don't just go for the one with the best benchmark score. Look for vendors that are transparent about uncertainty and explain how their models handle it. One of my favorite quotes from the article came from Neil Shaw at Counterpoint Technologies. He said, unlike human intelligence, AI lacks the humility to acknowledge uncertainty. It presents estimates as facts. And I mean, yeah, that's exactly the issue. So why does this matter to us in banking and risk management? Because when these tools are used for things like writing policy drafts, reviewing customer data, or helping with compliance checks, a hallucinated answer can lead to regulatory violations, customer harm, or a loss of trust. And that's a big deal. That's why you don't just need a flashy tool. You need one that gives your team space to intervene, collaborate outputs, and stay in control of the final decision. All right, now let's talk about data quality, because this is one of the most overlooked risks when using AI. AI systems depend on large volumes of data to function correctly. If that data is inaccurate, incomplete, outdated, or biased, it can lead to poor decisions, unfair outcomes, or compliance failures. So let's take a look at some types of poor data quality. And our first type is inaccurate data. This is just wrong stuff, typos, mislabels, errors. For example, let's say someone's income is listed as $80,000 instead of $180,000. The AI underwriting model sees that and denies their loan because it thinks they can't repay it. The model technically worked, but it was working off bad information. Then we have outdated data. This is data that used to be right, but isn't anymore. So let's say an AI tool is evaluating a business based on last year's numbers and flags them as low value. But what it doesn't know is that the business just secured a $5 million investment last quarter. That's a huge miss. And then we also have inconsistent data where the same information looks different across systems. So one system may say TX or spell out TX instead of Texas, another spells out Texas, and another has TEX in a dropdown. It sounds minor, but to an AI model, those could be 3 different places. That fragments customer records, breaks your insights, and lead to all kinds of messy analytics. Then we have incomplete data, things left blank, fields missing, partial uploads. So imagine a vendor file is missing a risk rating. The AI compliance tool just fills in the blank with low risk by default. But what if that vendor actually has some major red flags? And that's how things slip through the cracks. And then lastly, we have irrelevant data. This is just noise. Think of a chatbot trained on policy documents that have nothing to do with actual customer service. The result? Weird off-topic answers that just confuse customers and frustrate staff. So poor data isn't always obvious, but the impact is real. And why does this matter for financial institutions? Financial institutions depend on accuracy, timeliness, and precision. When AI systems pull from messy or mismatched data, the risk isn't just inconvenience. So the cleaner the data, the smarter the AI. Now, let's talk about how to actually control that risk before it creates a lot of problems. Well, you want to have data validation rules. This is your first line of defense. You want to make sure the data going into your AI system is clean, accurate, and complete. Then we want to have AI output monitoring. Don't just trust the AI system trust that the AI system is always right. If you start seeing weird patterns or off-the-wall suggestions, that might be a sign that the model is being fed bad data or that it's drawing the wrong conclusions from something inconsistent. And finally, vendor due diligence. If you're using a third-party vendor, make sure to ask the important questions. Where is your data coming from? How are you cleaning it? How do you know it's valid? If they can't answer that clearly, that might be a red flag. And at the end of the day, AI is only as smart as the data behind it. So our job is to make sure we're feeding it well. All right, next we have ethical bias. So ethical bias happens when an AI system produces unfair or discriminatory results, even if the data is technically accurate. It can come from historical patterns or of inequality baked into the training data or design choices made by developers. In banking, this might show up as certain groups being denied services or receiving different treatment without justification. Okay, so what are the differences between data quality and ethical bias? Well, when we talk about data quality, we're basically saying garbage in equals garbage out. If the information going into your AI model is wrong, outdated, incomplete, or messy, you're going to get weird or flat out wrong results. It's like asking a GPS to take you somewhere, but giving it the wrong address. And then there's ethical bias, and that's a whole different ballgame. This isn't just about whether the data is clean, it's about who the data might harm. AI models learn from history, and let's be honest, historical data can reflect a lot of societal biases. If we're not careful, the AI ends up learning those patterns and repeating them, or worse, amplifying them. So you might not see the bias in the algorithm itself, but it can sneak in through the training data or even how the data was labeled. And this matters because AI is now showing up in some really sensitive areas. And so I am going to play a scenario and impact situation for you so you can see how ethical bias is being used in AI models. So we have scenario and impact. If a loan approval AI model is trained on historical credit data, then some applicants may be denied loans even if they are credit worthy. If an AI resume screener is trained on historical hiring data, then some candidates may be rated lower or filtered out, even if they are qualified. If a fraud detection tool is trained on historical transaction information, then some customers may face transaction blocks, even if their activity is legitimate. So yeah, clean data is important, but fair data, that's really important. We need to be thinking not just about accuracy, but about impact. All right, so how can we control the risk for ethical bias in our AI models? Well, first, you want to audit AI models regularly. This isn't just a one and done deal. You want to test outputs over time and across different groups, especially where high stakes decisions are involved, like loans, fraud flags, or hiring. You want to make sure you're using high quality training data. Use data that reflects current realities, not outdated assumptions. And make sure it actually represents the people you serve, not just the majority or the most convenient group to sample. You want to include key stakeholders. You need domain experts who understand the context and diverse teams who can catch blind spots you might not even think to look for. If everyone at the table looks the same and thinks the same, bias is going to slip through. Implement explainability. AI doesn't get a free pass just because it's complicated. We need to know why it made a decision. If you can't explain it, you can't defend it. And we need to enforce vendor accountability. If you're using a third-party AI system, they should be able to show you how they're measuring fairness, mitigating bias, and improving over time. All right, next up is data leakage. And no, we're not talking about water damage. Data leakage happens when sensitive information accidentally slips through the cracks, like private customer data getting exposed, shared, or stored somewhere it shouldn't be. So let's take a look at some data or some types of data leakage here. First, we have training data leakage, when sensitive or regulated information is unintentionally included in training data. We also have prompt linkage. When confidential inputs provided to an AI model like chat history or account data are stored, cached, or exposed in future outputs. And we have output, when generated responses inadvertently include sensitive or private data. And then integration, when external plugins, APIs, or third-party tools access more data than intended. So for financial institutions, they manage high-value, regulated, and deeply personal data, including social security numbers, bank account and routing numbers, credit histories, and financial statements, all sorts of important information. And if this information leaks through an AI system, it can lead to regulatory violations with GLBA, GDPR, HIPAA, PC, all of them, right? And then reputation damage and customer mistrust, intellectual property loss, and security breaches or fraud. Now we're going to do the same scenario and impact examples for our data leakage risk. So in our first scenario, if employees paste sensitive data into AI tools like ChatGPT, then that data may be stored, exposed in future queries, or accessed by the vendor. If a bank connects an AI tool to its CRM without access limits, then the vendor may retrieve full customer profiles and expose personal information. If a publicly released AI model is trained on internal documents, then sensitive company data or business practices may be revealed through its outputs. So how can we control the risk for data leakage? Well, first of all, you want to classify data to ensure only appropriate data sets are used for AI interactions. So think of things like confidentiality. If this is confidential data, then we probably shouldn't be adding these into our AI systems without oversight or approval. Then we also need to restrict employee access to external AI tools and define clear usage in your acceptable use policies or in your AI policies. So making sure you have good standards for your employees to access to know what they should and shouldn't be using for AI systems. And then we also need to monitor AI integrations and APIs for excessive data access or sharing. So just making sure that those integrations and the APIs that we have to those AI models, we're restricting the level of access to data that they have. All right, so we talked a lot about AI and AI risk management. I wanted to offer up another resource. And we do have an AI risk assessment template available for our customers. So if you are subscribed to the Tandem risk assessment product, you have access to our risk assessment type or template. It may not show up on your page specifically. That's kind of confusing. Let me just say, you have to activate this template in your software. So if you go to the Assets tab, then to Risk Assessment, you click that little plus button next to the Information Asset, then you will see our list of templates and types of risk assessments, and that's where you'll be able to create the AI risk assessment inside the software. All right. AI is already shaping the way we work, from how we interact with customers to how we make decisions, hire employees, and secure our systems. Today, we talked about some of the most pressing risks like deepfakes, hallucinations, over-reliance, ethical bias, and the growing challenge of explainability and trust. These aren't far-off scenarios. They are already impacting the way institutions operate and the people they serve. And the truth is, you don't have to be a developer to manage AI risk. Whether you're selecting tools, writing policies, reviewing vendors, or shaping employee training, your role matters. So let's move forward with confidence, not fear. And always remember, if you take anything away from this presentation, always remember to keep a human in the loop and act with confidence there. So let's keep asking the hard questions, staying informed, and building systems that reflect not just what's possible, but what's responsible. Okay, so now let's get into the wrap up and questions. Let me double check to see if we have any questions that came in. If I can find my mouse, because I'm always losing it. Okay, this is a really great question. So what are some of the way vendors clean AI data we should look for? So really making sure, how can we identify that our vendors are keeping the data clean that they're using to train their models? Well, some of those ways is to ask specifically how they are asking for specific documentation. Be straightforward with the questions that you're asking and ask them how they're keeping it clean. Again, you cannot keep up with their coding and see every piece of data that they're using, but just ensuring that they're doing their part of auditing their inputs and auditing their outputs and making sure that things are staying clean on their end. And so just making sure that they are doing the right testing and doing the right monitoring for their AI systems, because again, you can't read through every line of data, every line of code, but you want to make sure that they can verify that they're doing their due diligence and making sure that the data that they're using is clean and accurate. Great question. Let me try this one. So is there a way to limit AI users from accidentally leaking confidential data into AI models? The only real solution I have found is allowing users to utilize these chat AI models that have been purchased by the organization. To some extent, is this all or nothing without adding an AI chat vendor? Okay, so if I'm understanding this question, we're wanting to limit how users, our employees, are using AI and what confidential data they're using for that. And so, you know, this is where that risk kicks in for that human element, right? We can't always monitor what our employees are adding to AI systems, but it is our responsibility to make sure that they are aware that they're not supposed to add that confidential data into the AI that we're using or that we've approved for them to use. And so just making sure that they are being trained and that they're aware of what data should not be. So being very clear in your acceptable use policies and your AI policy, and being clear of what they can add into the AI system, even restricting access. If not all your employees need access to AI, then we don't need to give them all access. That's really up to your organization and the risk that or in the innovative tools that you want to use at your organization, right? And so, yeah, and again, I think one of the best things to do when you're using your AI models or chatbots is making sure that you are having your users go into their settings and making sure that they opt out of some options. So like, you know, making sure you're opting out that the AI model is not being trained off your data. That's a really good control that you can use for that too. And so just taking a look at those terms and conditions for that AI model, seeing how long they're retaining information, and also educating your employees on what they can add into that AI model. Great question. You know, I really love this question and I am going to answer it. So the question is, did you use AI to create content for your webinar? And I'm going to be straightforward and honest. Yes, I absolutely used AI to help with the brainstorming part of my presentation. I think AI is a great way to brainstorm when you're writing and when you're providing presentations like this, looking for more information and doing research. It's really great for that. I am not one to say that you can never use AI for anything. The main thing is that I want to make sure that my content is coming from me and that it's from my brain and it's me delivering it. So yes, I did use AI to help me create some of the content, but the delivery and the last things that you just saw is all for me, and it's something that I'm proud of. And so yeah, again, this presentation is not to say that you should never use AI and that it's a huge threat to your organization. It's very helpful. My main goal is to say AI is good. It can be good, but we want to make sure that we have a human always interacting and always reviewing and always a part of that process when it comes to AI. Great question. Thank you for asking that. Oh, okay. Wow. Okay. I'm way over time. I'm going to go ahead and move on. Thank you so much for asking your questions. If I didn't get to your questions, I will definitely get back to you after this presentation. Thank you so much. Just a couple of things. Make sure you sign up for that next webinar about the resources that are being provided by the Treasury Department. Again, it's going to be on Thursday, April 30th at 2 p.m. And don't forget to fill out the survey for a chance to win a $25 gift card. All right, thank you so much for attending. I appreciate your time. I had fun. I hope you guys had fun. And if you have any other questions that you didn't get to ask during this webinar, please reach out to me. I'll be happy to talk to you and answer your questions. Thank you so much.